For all the new players on Valorant, aiming can honestly be really difficult, and I don't blame any of you. Console has never really seen a game with this type of gunplay since CSGO, like on the 360, which was ages ago. This is why I have decided to compile a few key things that you should start doing that will instantly improve your aim. Let's begin with the most important one, movement. Movement and aim go hand in hand in the long run. While moving in Valorant, as you know, your shots will not be totally accurate. When in a 1v1 with someone, the best approach to newer players is to just stand still while shooting to get that full accuracy effect, and sometimes even spray. However, it actually might be best to get rid of the habit of spraying in every engagement and learning how to tap shoot. You may see it in some of my gameplay, but tap shooting is basically firing off one or a few shots in when you pause in between strafes. It looks like this and can be extremely effective in long-range gunfights. Now, how can you maximize this? In Valorant, when moving left or right, you have to wait for your character to come to a complete stop before your shot can be completely accurate. If you ever watched a PC aiming video, you actually might hear them tell you sometimes that counter-strafing is kind of pointless because your movement always comes to a near instant stop. Just a quick definition for those who don't know, counter-strafing is a technique on Valorant and Counter-Strike where you quickly tap the opposite movement key when strafing that instantly stops your character movement so you can get that full accuracy. As I mentioned, many people will say no to counter-strafing because it might not be too necessary, but I absolutely disagree when it comes to console. When you take your finger off of a thumbstick to stop moving, the time to stop can be a little longer on console, which is why I think it is so important. Here is a way to practice your counter-strafe and how to actually do it on console. Before we start, it could really help to go to your crosshair settings and turn on movement error to really get a feel for it. The arrows on the screen show the direction in which I am moving my thumbstick, and if the arrows are still on the screen, that means that I'm still holding it. As you can see here, I am strafing right, and when I come to a complete stop by either moving my thumbstick back to the center or simply letting go, it takes a little bit before my crosshair realigns itself, meaning I am not fully accurate. Now let's incorporate counter-strafing, where I'm going to instantly shoot the second I press my thumbstick in the opposite direction to which I was initially strafing. It is essential that you know when I say opposite movement, I mean pressing your thumbstick all the way to the right or left, depending on which way you were moving originally. This is incredibly useful. You can utilize the counter strafe to shoot the second you get maximum accuracy, while not losing a single bit of momentum. Making sure that you don't stop moving in situations like the ones you see on screen can be really important. This is a perfect way to practice it in the practice range. If you keep lowering the time in between counter strafes, you can really get a feel for it, and then a better way to practice would just be to just incorporate it in game. If you guys really want to, I can dedicate a whole video to counter strafing in the future, but for the sake of this video, I'm keeping it relatively short. Another very important thing for newer players, and even Valorant veterans on console specifically, is walking. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, walking can be a little awkward on console because of the light touch on your thumbstick that is needed. However, you really need to put in the time and effort of learning walking, as it is essential for a game like Valorant. As I've mentioned, a lot of people actually use focus as a crutch for walking, which is really not good. You can't just peek everything while in focus. I personally don't even use focus at all, so I've actually forced myself to learn how to use my left thumbstick. You need to learn how to switch between walking and running when peeking a corner or peeking an angle, which is why I think it's so important that you take the time to learn how to use your left thumbstick to walk. There's a setting in game for this which I have been asked about, but I personally recommend you keep it at default. But if you want to run a little easier with less input on your thumbstick, this can maybe be for you, but it's really not optimal. There really is no way to practice walking in the practice range. I mean, you could mess around with it. The best way is to just apply it. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about is crosshair placement. Crosshair placement is something that generally applies to every game, but it's especially in ones like Valorant. Having your crosshair at head level is step one of good crosshair placement. This is not the hardest thing to do, but a lot of newer players tend to forget to keep their crosshair here, and they like to look at the floor or just look anywhere else but head level. If you are one of these players, just keep your crosshair where you think the enemy head will be. This is obviously simplified, but it really just is what it is. The next very important step to crosshair placement, which can be a little more complex, is the pre-aim. The idea of pre-aiming is that you keep your crosshair aligned to the angle that you want to peek, so that once you've peeked, your crosshair is already where you think the enemy will be. This makes aiming a lot easier because then you won't have to adjust as much, and this is incredibly important on a controller. Sometimes on a controller, it can be a little difficult to instantly adjust your aim. A good way to practice both crosshair placement and pre-aiming is to just grind a few deathmatches to really get better mechanics and to make it a habit. Something that I personally used to do, and what people still do nowadays, is actually pinging a spot and then using that as a reference. If you are a newer player and you're still not too familiar with maps, this can actually be a big help because you know where to pre-aim. But it's a little funny because I haven't seen anyone on console do it because you rarely see people pull up their full-size map during a round. I think some people don't even know you can do that. It's a really good practice, I promise. Now, there's a whole lot more that I can go into with crosshair placement, and I'm simplifying it again for the purpose of this video. But if you guys want a way more in-depth guide for console, then I'd be happy to do it in the future. That's all I have for right now. There is so much that you could do to get better aim on Valorant, but to not make this video too long, I have deduced these 3 as some of the most important. I will definitely be making another one of these videos in the near future, and I can't wait to see you all there. Keep practicing, and I love you all. Peace.